This isn't a charity flight. The word snapped across the cabin like a slap. Heads turned, brows raised. The woman in first class, tall, straight-backed, navy blue uniform, polished to perfection, hadn't whispered. She had said it loud. Loud enough for every passenger within 3 rows to hear. Lydia Bloom froze. One hand still on her backpack strap, the other holding out her boarding pass stub, as if she wasn't sure what she'd done wrong. "Go sit where you belong," the flight attendant added, with a fake smile too sharp to be polite. Someone in 1B chuckled under their breath. A guy in a business suit murmured, "Well, that's more like it." Lydia didn't respond, didn't argue. She just stepped aside and let the pregnant woman she'd offered her seat to ease into 2A. Then, with every eye tracking her like a stain that didn't belong on leather, Lydia walked the full length of the cabin in silence. What no one knew, the quiet white girl in the oversized hoodie was about to drop $18.9 million worth of karma on this flight. Tell us where you're watching from. Because this story, it gets real in 7 minutes. Lydia Bloom had never cared for attention. At 15, she had perfected the art of blending in, which wasn't hard when you dressed like a college dropout, kept your mouth shut, and carried yourself like you had more important things to think about than what people thought of you. But even she wasn't prepared for the heat of those stares in coach. Her seat? 24B, middle. Obviously. She slipped between the armrests, settled in, and pulled out the one thing she did care about. Her tablet. Sleek, silver, nondescript, but loaded with FAA-authorized credential access. Because Lydia wasn't just a kid. She was the youngest ethics scholar ever granted Tier 2 override privileges on the Sky Ethics anchor system. And that flight attendant back there? She'd just made her last mistake. 15 minutes earlier, Lydia had boarded like any other first-class passenger. Her ticket flagged her as unaccompanied youth, but her status? Cleared through a government liaison program for aviation ethics observers. No one needed to know that part. Her seat, 2A, was quiet, soft, and had excellent line of sight. Not just for reading or snacks, but for observational integrity. She was planning to spend the 2-hour flight logging behavioral compliance patterns, quiet work, civil work. But then the pregnant woman boarded, flustered, sweating, red-faced, holding her back with one hand and a printed boarding pass with the other. "I'm 24B, she told the gate agent. "But I can't really make it all the way to the back." She looked like she could collapse. The crew tried to shuffle things. No one budged. So Lydia did the math in 3 seconds flat. One seat traded for another. No risk, no fuss, no delay. She stood and offered her seat. But instead of thanks, she got that tone. The flight attendant, Beverly Stokes, per her badge, didn't just decline the offer. She humiliated Lydia, loud and proud, in front of half the cabin. Back in 24B, Lydia exhaled slowly and tapped her screen to life. Sky Ethics Anchor, Federal Observation Mode. Active, login. Lydia Bloom, FAAY, Ethics Scholar, T2. Environment, live target, Flight 3412, DCA. Beverly's crew profile popped up within seconds. Green marker. Compliant, no reports. That wouldn't last. She tapped log entry. Timestamp, 0927 EST incident ID. Verbal misconduct toward minor observer. Description, public humiliation. Class-based prejudice. Violation of FAA Behavioral Code 2.1b. Video evidence. Attached. First-class cam 2A2B view. The system pinged confirmation. The first marker turned amber, then red. Someone kicked her seat from behind. She didn't react. From the front of coach, a flight attendant returned with a snack box and a crooked grin. "This is what we've got back here," she said. "No lemon slice, sorry." She winked. "But you gave up a good one. Must feel like an angel, huh?" Lydia stared at the box. "Not hungry?" the woman asked with fake concern. "I'll log this too," Lydia said plainly. "What?" But Lydia was already typing. Second incident. Derogatory comment during food service. Intent, mockery. Tag, escalation behavior, repeat pattern confirmed. The woman snorted and walked away. Lydia barely blinked, because now she had enough. Enough for escalation protocol. Enough to trigger a real-time reassessment of the airline's ethics compliance score. And Sky Ethics anchor didn't just score crew, it scored carriers. Lydia quietly opened the back end and submitted a provisional downgrade report on behalf of FAA Tier 2 Ethics Oversight. Within 3 minutes, 3 alerts pinged. Sky North Airways. Preliminary ethics rating dropped to 72.5, under review. FAA Oversight. Flag. Live review requested within 6 hours. Sky funding eligibility. Temporarily suspended. 18.9 mm pending. Lydia looked out the window. The sky outside was calm. Unlike the storm she had just set in motion. The plane landed at Reagan National with a jolt sharper than expected. But Lydia Bloom didn't flinch. While most passengers were tugging at seatbelts and gathering bags, she was already 3 steps ahead, shutting down her tablet, wiping the screen with a cloth, and tucking it away in her backpack like it was nothing more than a sketchbook. To the untrained eye, she looked like any quiet teenager, maybe a little odd, with her oversized hoodie and refusal to make eye contact. But anyone who knew what had just happened in flight would have seen something very different. A federal ethics analyst who just triggered a preliminary freeze on $18.9 million in FAA-linked subsidies. She stood up without waiting for her row to clear and moved swiftly, head down, past the first-class cabin. Beverly Stokes stood near the galley, arms crossed. The woman barely acknowledged her. But Lydia? She looked her dead in the eye, not with rage, not even with satisfaction, just finality, like she already knew this chapter was over. Inside the terminal, Lydia moved fast, not rushed, but with purpose. She passed a security officer without so much as a glance. Her ID had cleared long before her flight even took off. She was expected. On the mezzanine level, a tall man in a slate gray suit leaned against a glass barrier. His watch said $5,000, but his posture screamed Pentagon. He straightened as soon as he saw her. "Lydia Bloom?" She nodded. "You're not my mother's contact." "I'm not," he said, handing her a badge. "I'm from the Senate Transportation Committee. We moved up your hearing." Lydia blinked once. "Because of Flight 3412. He didn't answer, just nodded toward the elevator. "They're ready for you." In the Senate building, room 426B looked more like a converted courtroom than a hearing room. Rows of reporters had already lined up outside. Inside, a small circle of policy advisors sat hunched over papers, whispering with urgency. As Lydia entered, heads turned. Not because she was famous, but because she was young. Uncomfortably young for the weight of what she was about to do. Senator Albright, chairwoman of the subcommittee, leaned forward behind her microphone. "Miss Bloom, we understand you arrived not more than an hour ago, and yet we've just received an emergency downgrade request on Sky North's ethics file, signed under your access credentials." Lydia didn't sit yet. "Yes, ma'am, that's correct." The room paused. "Would you care to explain?" Albright continued. Lydia opened her backpack and retrieved her tablet. 1 tap, 2. She mirrored it to the screen behind the dais. A video played, Beverly Stokes' voice slicing through the cabin. "This isn't a charity flight." Gasps from the pregnant woman, Lydia walking down the aisle. No narration, no anger, just facts. "I filed 2 reports," Lydia said. "Both involve direct violations of FAA passenger dignity policy and discriminatory enforcement of seating protocol. As a Tier 2 ethics observer, I have authority to initiate provisional downgrade pending review." "And you did this mid-flight?" one senator asked. "Yes, and I stand by every detail." Whispers spread across the room. Albright leaned closer. "Did you know Sky North is up for renewal on a federal access contract worth just under $19 million? "I do now," Lydia replied. Back at Sky North's DC corporate office, panic had begun to ripple. The ethics alert had hit their internal compliance dashboard 15 minutes ago. Their COO, sweating through a tailored shirt, was on the phone with the FAA's crisis line. "I need a name," he barked. "Who the hell submitted the report?" A pause. Then came the answer. "Lydia Bloom." There was silence on the line. Then, very softly, "She's the one who wrote the Bloom addendum." Lydia had never cared for titles, but the truth was, she hadn't just logged a complaint. She had designed the very amendment to the Sky Ethics Anchor Protocol that allowed youth observers to escalate misconduct reports in real time. That amendment? It was known in FAA circles as the Bloom Addendum, so when she signed that downgrade, it carried weight. Later that afternoon, Lydia sat quietly in a corner of the terminal, watching people board other flights. The woman she gave her seat to earlier had found her. She approached slowly. I wanted to thank you," she said. Lydia looked up. The woman extended a hand. "I'm Mara Kellerman." Lydia froze. The name hit her like ice water because she knew that name. From the boxes in her mother's attic, from the tribunal papers she once read at 1 a.m., Mara Kellerman was the daughter of Richard Kellerman, former Sky North executive, the man who testified against her mother, the man who ended her mother's flying career, and now Lydia had given his daughter her seat. "I didn't know who you were," Mara said quietly. "I didn't either," Lydia replied. But something about the moment shifted, not with hate, but with balance. Like two lives, once torn apart by injustice, had finally collided in an act of dignity, and this time, it would be remembered. Not through violence, but through ethics. And a girl named Bloom. Lydia sat quietly in a corner booth at the airport cafe, her hood pulled halfway over her head, tablet resting against a lukewarm cup of tea she hadn't touched. Outside the terminal glass, flights came and went like nothing had happened. But inside her screen, the world had just shifted. She opened the secure folder the Senate aide had transferred onto her device, the one marked Confidential Tribunal Archive, 2009 to 2011, the year her mother disappeared from the aviation world. She clicked the first file. Bloom, Evelyn, former lead analyst, FAA Ethics Task Force. A grainy photo loaded. Her mother looked barely older than Lydia was now, chin raised, eyes clear, defiant. The transcript below it, however, told a different story. A slow unraveling of trust, power, and punishment. Lydia scrolled. "Why do you believe your termination was unjustified?" "Because I reported a pattern of discriminatory behavior against underage passengers and female employees in the Sky North service model." "Do you have proof?" "Yes, but I doubt this room wants to see it." Lydia's chest tightened. The voice in the transcript, the tone, it wasn't just brave. It was strategic. Her mother hadn't come to that tribunal to beg for her job back. She came to leave a record, and then she found it. Line 1478 in the third file. The clause, hidden in legal jargon and obscure compliance language. In cases where the active in-flight ethics monitor is under the age of 18, and if immediate human dignity violations are observed, that minor observer shall retain authority to activate provisional downgrade procedures via Sky Ethics Anchor v3.1 or later. Her hand trembled slightly. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't luck. It was intentional. Her mother had written a backdoor into the very system that corporations later used to exile her. A clause buried so deep, only someone who shared her code-writing style would ever find it. Someone like Lydia. 3 terminals away, in a white-tiled conference room inside the Sky North Legal Division, chaos had erupted. "Who the hell authorized the downgrade?" the compliance officer barked. A junior analyst scrolled through his dashboard, voice tight. Name came in encrypted, but it was tagged Tier 2 Verified. Observer ID 7764BL. He paused. Bloom. Everyone froze. The chief counsel whispered, "That name's not new." A director in the back muttered, "Isn't that the woman who flagged our diversity algorithm in 2010? Silence. Then the COO stood slowly. Her daughter, the kid on the plane, that's who flagged us. Phones lit up. Conference lines opened, and within 10 minutes, every major airline compliance team connected to SkyEthics Anchor had received the same internal alert. Preliminary downgrade initiated. Audit triggered. Associated carriers under review. The price tag, not just 18.9 mm in federal access, but all linked funding tied to the same ethics corridor. Back at the cafe, Lydia finally took a sip of her cold tea. She stared down at the screen again, but this time it wasn't the tribunal files that caught her attention. It was a message, a direct one, from an account labeled Mara Kellerman Private. "I didn't know who you were. Until now. Can we talk?" Lydia's breath caught. That name. Kellerman. She opened a new window and pulled up her archive on Sky North's 2011 tribunal. And there it was. Richard Kellerman, head of internal investigations, lead testimony against Evelyn Bloom. Final recommendation. Termination without appeal. And Mara? His daughter. The pregnant woman Lydia had given her seat to. 10 minutes later, they sat across from each other at gate C-14, both looking more uncomfortable than either wanted to admit. "I know who you are," Lydia said, not an accusation, just fact. Mara nodded slowly. "My dad doesn't talk about that time, but I remember the day he came home after the hearing. He looked shaken, said he wasn't proud of what he'd done." Lydia raised an eyebrow. "I was 12, Mara added. "Didn't know what he meant then. I do now." Lydia stared at the woman's hand, clasped over her stomach. She hadn't come here to assign guilt, but something about fate bringing them together, on that flight, in that row, made her feel like this meeting had been arranged long before either of them had boarded. "You know he lied, right?" Lydia said quietly. Mara nodded. "I think he did what he thought was necessary to protect the company, not the truth, and not your mom." Lydia didn't speak for a while, but when she finally did, it wasn't about revenge. She was trying to change the way children and women were treated in flight, not because she needed credit, but because she believed dignity belonged to everyone. No exceptions. Mara's eyes filled. "You gave me your seat, and I didn't deserve it. I didn't give it because of you," Lydia said. "I gave it because it was right. Same reason my mom built that clause." At the FAA Ethics Oversight Center, a senior analyst pulled up Lydia's activity logs. "What she triggered," he said, "wasn't just a complaint. It forced a full ethics domino." His colleague looked over, confused. "What do you mean?" He turned the screen toward her. 3 airlines, Sky North, Aerolink, JetLinks, all now tagged Pending Ethics Review, Federal Tier. The system had cross-referenced personnel overlap and found shared training, policy copy-pasting, and identical punitive patterns. "This kid didn't just call out one injustice," he added. "She detonated a whole system loophole." That evening, as the headlines began circulating, "Teen Ethics Analyst Freezes Airline Access." Lydia walked alone down a quiet street in D.C., hoodie up, backpack light. She stopped by a bookstore and ducked inside. The clerk, a woman in her 60s, looked up. "Cold out there tonight?" Lydia nodded, distracted. "Just looking." She wandered to the back, pulled out a book on administrative law, then paused when she saw an old aviation ethics report, one her mom co-authored. She flipped it open. Page 97, the dedication. "For those too young to speak and those too tired to keep shouting. Your rights still matter." She stared at the words and whispered, "They always did." Lydia stood outside the Federal Aviation Administration's downtown D.C. building, staring at the mirrored windows as if expecting one of them to open and call her in. She clutched a slim envelope in her hand, the same one Mara had handed her after their quiet meeting at Gate C-14. On it, scrawled in Mara's careful handwriting, "For her, when you're ready." She wasn't sure who her was supposed to be, herself, her mother, or something bigger, like the legacy. Inside the envelope were 5 pages. No watermark, no official headers, just rows of names, flight logs, and asterisks. The title across the top: Passenger Dossier, Internal Use Only, Sky North, SJL, Aero Link. It was a list of passengers whose in-flight experiences had triggered soft-flagged behavior reports, but were never investigated. Most were children, many were women, a few were elderly, and most shared one thing in common: their names weren't white. One name was circled: Maya E. Bloom, her grandmother. Lydia blinked, her throat tightening. She didn't even know Maya had ever flown. She'd passed when Lydia was 6. All she remembered was the woman's sharp wit, soft hands, and the smell of peppermint lotion. She flipped to the attached notes. Incident, 1994. Passenger MEB forcibly removed from gate seating due to dress code irregularities. Was not recorded in official logs. Settlement offered but never cashed. Passenger declined interview. Case archived by Kellerman, R. Lydia closed the envelope. 3 generations. 3 women. All touched, not by fate, but by design. That night, Lydia met Mara again. This time, not in an airport, but in the back corner of a quiet public library in Arlington. The place was empty, except for a few students pretending to study. Mara pushed a flash drive across the table. "This has everything," she said softly. "Meeting minutes, internal chats, even the list of settlements paid to silence complaints like your grandmother's." Lydia didn't touch it yet. "You didn't have to do this," she said. Mara shrugged. "Maybe not, but my father did, and now I do." Lydia studied her for a moment. "What changed your mind?" Mara looked away for a second, then said, "My daughter will be born in 6 weeks. I want her to grow up in a world where giving up your seat doesn't make you a target, especially if you look like you don't belong in it." Back at her apartment that night, Lydia plugged in the flash drive. Files popped up like digital ghosts. She filtered by year, 2010 to 2024. Patterns emerged. Flight 498, 2012. Teen girl flagged for attitude after refusing to switch seats with a business traveler. Flight 883, 2017. Elderly black veteran downgraded for mobility risk, despite presenting medical clearance. Flight 2209, 2023. Muslim woman removed due to passenger discomfort from a white family nearby. Every case followed the same trajectory: flag, suppress, settle, silence. Until now. Because Lydia wasn't signing NDAs, and she wasn't staying silent. Meanwhile, the FAA's Ethics Compliance Division had quietly convened a midnight call. Someone from the Office of Legal Risk had forwarded Lydia's automated downgrade log, with full metadata, to the Senate Subcommittee on Transportation Ethics. Chairwoman Eloise Hardin, a sharp-tongued former prosecutor, sat at the head of the call, sipping black coffee. "So let me get this straight," she said. "A 15-year-old activated an ethics failover, and it worked?" "Yes, ma'am," said an analyst. "And now 3 airlines are being flagged for violations dating back over a decade?" "Yes, ma'am." Hardin leaned back, eyebrows arched. "Well, that's a hell of a girl." The call ended with 2 decisions. A preliminary federal audit would begin within 48 hours. A public ethics hearing would be held within the month, with a list of past victims invited to testify. Back in D.C., Lydia met with her mother for the first time in 2 years. Evelyn Bloom looked thinner than Lydia remembered. Hair streaked with gray. Eyes tired but still bright. They sat at a small Thai place on U Street, chicken satay between them, neither saying much at first. "I found the clause," Lydia finally said. Evelyn's fork paused, then a slow smile. "You found it?" "I did more than that. I used it. Her mother's eyes welled. I wasn't sure anyone would ever dig deep enough. I wasn't trying to prove anything, Lydia added. But they gave me a reason. What happened? Lydia told her everything. The flight, the crew's mockery, the downgrade, the file from Mara, the flash drive, the hearing. When she finished, Evelyn just sat there speechless. Then she reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. You just woke up the system. As word spread online, #LydiaClaws began trending on social media. Activists, former passengers, even retired flight staff began to come forward. Stories poured in of discrimination, humiliation, erasure. Meanwhile, Lydia received a direct message from a strange but verified account. SenateEthicsCom.gov. You've been named as a key witness. We'd like to schedule a private session before the hearing. Please confirm. Lydia stared at the message for a long time before replying, confirmed. 1 week later, Lydia stood in a quiet hearing room beneath Capitol Hill, wearing her mother's old blazer and holding a folder marked Passenger Ethics Reform Proposal Draft V11. It wasn't official yet. Wasn't official, but she'd written every page. As the senators filed in, aides whispered and typed rapidly behind them. Lydia stood tall, not because she wanted to, but because the system had given her no other choice. Across the aisle, she spotted CEO Alan Drest of Sky North, sweat already visible on his collar. Next to him, legal teams from JetLinks and AeroLink shuffled nervously. She didn't smile. The hearing room was still. Cameras were off. Phones were checked at the door. What unfolded here wouldn't go live. Not yet. Lydia sat across from 4 senators, a legal clerk, and 2 ethics officers from the FAA. The table was too long, and the nameplate in front of her, Ms. Lydia Bloom, looked almost comical. A child in a grown-up seat. At least, that's how they wanted her to feel. But Lydia had something they didn't: the truth, the data, and the ghost of every silenced passenger before her. Senator Eloise Hardin, sharp in a navy blazer, leaned forward. Miss Bloom, she said gently, you understand that today's conversation is preliminary. You're not under oath. You're not on trial. Lydia nodded once. I know. And you understand the consequences of your activation? 3 airlines are now under full federal ethics audit. FAA subsidies have been frozen. $18.9 million is in immediate review. I do. Hardin looked impressed, but careful. Then tell us, why did you do it? Lydia didn't look at her notes. I didn't do it because of what they said to me, she said. I did it because of what they didn't say to the pregnant woman they made me feel guilty for helping, and because I realized that my seat wasn't the thing they hated. It was the idea of someone like me being allowed to choose to give it away. A silence followed. Then, walk us through the activation protocol. Lydia explained it cleanly, how the Sky Ethics anchor worked, the hidden clause her mother had embedded in 2009, the biometric link from her FAA internship ID, how the system scanned for triggers in behavior, mockery, coercion, dereliction of passenger dignity, and how, with one tap, no password, no key, she'd flagged Flight 2289. You knew what would happen? Senator Dovitz asked. I knew the system would run its score. I didn't know it would cascade. Cascade? He frowned. I didn't know it would drag 3 airlines down with it. Later that day, behind closed doors, the FAA compliance officers debated the next steps. We can't hide this, said one. Too many files were surfaced. It's like the claws swept all the skeletons out of the closet. This girl just exposed 12 years of soft-cover discrimination data, another whispered. They're going to make her a symbol. They already have. 3 days passed. Lydia kept mostly off the internet. She ignored the trending hashtags. She stopped reading the news. Her mind wasn't on the fire she'd started. It was on the ripple. Because the story wasn't about her anymore. It was about Evelyn Bloom. It was about Maya E. Bloom. It was about mothers who weren't heard, daughters who weren't seen, and systems that smiled while quietly rearranging the truth. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. They're going to fight it. Hard. Don't let them twist the narrative. M.K. Mara Kellerman. The hearing went public that Thursday. It was nationally televised. Lydia didn't speak this time, but she watched as the former head of in-flight ethics for Jet Links admitted on record that passenger reviews were filtered by risk optics, which heavily correlated with racial, age, and class bias. Another clip showed Sky North CEO Alan Drest, red-faced and stammering, being asked, "Can you explain why 74% of all flagged passengers on record were under the age of 18? He blamed algorithmic overreach. The crowd murmured. The chairwoman didn't flinch. A week later, Lydia was invited to a closed strategy summit hosted by the Passenger Equity Coalition, a non-profit think tank formed by civil rights lawyers, tech watchdogs, and former flight attendants. She arrived in a black hoodie, jeans, and no makeup. Still just a teenager. But when she walked in, the room stood up. A woman from the ACLU leaned in and whispered, "The last time we saw a clause this cleanly buried in federal code was the Fair Housing Act. Your mom was a genius." "I know," Lydia said. They handed her a document. Draft, Lydia Bloom Passenger Rights Enforcement Act. She stared at the title. "I didn't ask for this," she said. A man from the FAA shrugged. "You didn't have to. You earned it." That night, Evelyn came by her daughter's apartment. She brought food, Thai again, like a full circle. They sat on the couch, boxes open, the TV off. "I keep thinking about Grandma," Lydia said. "I looked her up. Her case was buried so deep I wouldn't have found it if I hadn't seen that list." "She was strong," Evelyn replied. "But she was tired. She didn't want a war. She just wanted to live with dignity." Lydia looked down. "What if they come after me? What if the airline starts smearing me? What if I ruin your career?" Evelyn smiled gently. "Sweetheart, my career was already ruined. They just didn't send the memo. But you're rewriting the whole damn book." By Monday, the FAA released a statement acknowledging the Sky Ethics Clause was real, valid, and had been dormant but live for over a decade. Telltales, one of the fastest-growing digital journalism platforms, published a story titled "The Teen Who Unplugged the Airlines, Lydia Bloom's Quiet Revolution." It went viral. A clip from the article read, "In a world where outrage is loud and fleeting, Lydia Bloom reminds us that real power lies in staying still long enough to know when to push the right button." Her button just happened to freeze 18.9 mm and unearth 12 years of industry secrets. Lydia returned to school the following week, but things weren't the same. Her teachers looked at her like she was older. Her classmates whispered. Some cheered. Some rolled their eyes, but no one ignored her anymore. She sat in the back row of AP Civics. Her teacher, Mr. Lockett, cleared his throat and turned on the projector. "We were going to talk about the 1964 Civil Rights Act today," he said, "but I think we've got something more relevant." On the screen appeared, "Passenger Ethics and Reform, Draft, Lydia Bloom Act." Lydia didn't raise her hand. She didn't speak. She just listened, notebook open. That evening, a call came from Capitol Hill, Senator Hardin's office. "Lydia," the voice said, "we'd like you to present the opening statement for the formal proposal of the Lydia Bloom Act next week. It's not required, but it would matter." Lydia exhaled. "Okay," she said, "but I'm not speaking for myself." "Who are you speaking for?" She didn't pause. Everyone they thought would stay quiet. The grand chamber inside Capitol Hill was built to feel intimidating. Every corner was designed to echo silence. Every spotlight to expose doubt. It was a room meant for lobbyists, legacy, and political theater, not teenage girls with blunt truth and a backpack full of notes. But Lydia Bloom didn't flinch. She adjusted the cuffs of her blazer, her grandmother's, altered slightly to fit, and stepped up to the podium. Cameras rolled. Senators leaned in. Airline executives sat stiffly behind their lawyers. The public gallery was packed. And somewhere in the back, Evelyn Bloom sat quietly, hand over her heart, watching her daughter become everything she'd once been told to suppress. The chair tapped the mic. We will now hear the opening statement from Ms. Lydia Bloom, daughter of Evelyn Bloom and granddaughter of Maya E. Bloom. Miss Bloom, you may begin. Lydia looked down at her prepared remarks, then folded them up. I wrote a speech, she said, but I'm not going to read it. The room shifted. I gave up my first-class seat on Flight 2289 for a pregnant woman because I thought it was the right thing to do. The crew made fun of me for it, but that's not why I'm standing here. She inhaled. I'm standing here because they tried to shrink me into silence, and because the systems you oversee are still designed to reward quiet compliance instead of ethical courage. She told them about the clause, about the Sky Ethics anchor, about the flash drive from Mara, about her grandmother's erased history, about the moment she realized that giving up her seat was the only part of the flight that didn't need reform. Airlines don't fear lawsuits, she continued. They plan for them. What they fear is visibility, systems, scores, the kind of data that can't be buried under NDAs or paid settlements. She paused, scanning the room. That's what the clause was meant to do, not to punish anyone, but to reflect the system back to itself, unfiltered. When Lydia finished, silence followed. No one clapped, no one coughed, just a pause that lingered long enough to feel like recognition. Then Senator Hardin nodded slowly. Thank you, Miss Bloom. That was uncompromising. The hearing proceeded with testimonies from data analysts, civil rights attorneys, and 2 other passengers who had been flagged unfairly. But everyone knew the moment belonged to Lydia. In one corner, a New York Times reporter typed furiously, headline already forming in her head, "The girl who gave up her seat and took a stand." After the hearing, Lydia was ushered to a side chamber for press questions. She was met by cameras, hot lights, and a swarm of mics. Lydia, did you know your clause would trigger an 18.9 mem freeze? No. Are you afraid the airlines will retaliate? I'm afraid they won't change. What do you want next? Lydia looked directly at the reporter. A system where passengers aren't punished for decency, where ethics isn't a PR buzzword, but a measurable responsibility. A soft clapping began behind the camera. Journalists, former flight crew, even a few ex-executives who had quietly left the industry. The next morning, Veritas Capital, one of the largest ethics-backed investment consortiums in the U.S., released a statement. Following recent revelations and pending federal reform, we are suspending 18.9 M in joint aviation investment tied to any airline found non-compliant. Under the Sky Ethics Anchor Review, 3 airlines were affected: Sky North, JetLinks, and Aerolink. A soft clapping began behind the camera. Journalists, former flight crew, even a few ex-executives who had quietly left the industry. Their stocks plummeted 6 to 9% in pre-market trading. And before lunch, Sky North's chief ethics officer resigned. By evening, Lydia received a secure email from the FAA's Internal Review Board. We are requesting your input in co-developing the framework for a new industry-wide ethics audit system. Working title, PEARL, Passenger Ethics Accountability and Reform Ledger. Attached was a blank template, no code yet, just space. Lydia stared at the blinking cursor and typed the first line. Passenger dignity is not a luxury. It is the gate through which the industry enters the future. 2 days later, Evelyn and Lydia visited Maya Bloom's grave. They hadn't been there in years. The sky was soft gray. Wind picked up the hem of Lydia's coat. They stood quietly, flowers in hand. She never flew again after that, Evelyn said, her voice brittle. After they dragged her from that seat, she said, they don't want me in the air. Maybe I was meant to build ground for others instead. Lydia kneeled and placed the flowers gently. She built more than ground, Mom, she whispered. She built the foundation. That weekend, Lydia gave her first formal interview on a Telltale Special Report episode. The host, a woman in her 40s with a calm but piercing voice, opened with, "Most viral stories fade. Yours didn't. Why?" Lydia answered, "Because it wasn't about me. It was about the claws, the files, the silence. People didn't share my story because I gave up a seat. They shared it because they've been sitting in silence for too long. You're 15. I've been 15 in this world long enough to know how people treat what doesn't look powerful." At the end of the episode, the host asked, "What now?" Lydia smiled slightly. Now, the airlines listen. Lydia sat in a sunlit glass conference room overlooking downtown DC. She was still wearing her hoodie, the same one she'd worn the day the world found out about the claws. Only now, the hoodie looked different. Not because it changed, but because she had. Opposite her sat a panel of FAA engineers, ethics consultants, and one woman from Veritas Capital named June Carrington, whose quiet presence filled the room like strategy fills silence. On the screen behind them, a logo blinked to life. PEARL, Passenger Ethics Accountability and Reform Ledger. Lydia looked at it carefully. "Did you know that pearls are made from discomfort?" she said softly. Everyone turned to her. It's true. When an oyster is hurt, it wraps the wound in something beautiful. That's what we're doing here, right? No one spoke, but heads nodded. The meeting began with frameworks, legal constraints, cross-airline data systems, algorithmic behavior recognition models. Lydia took notes. Then slowly, she raised her hand. "We're still talking about systems that observe behavior," she said, "but not the ones that enable it." One of the engineers frowned. "Can you clarify?" "Sure," Lydia replied. "We're flagging bad actions, but what about the policies that allow them? Like how staff are rewarded for quick boarding, even if it means rushing vulnerable passengers. Or how seat reassignment is code for move the people who won't fight back." That quieted the room. June finally spoke. "So, what are you proposing?" Lydia met her eyes. "Scoring the policies themselves, not just the people." By week's end, Lydia had outlined a 3-layer framework for the Flight Justice Index, a system within PEARL that would audit airline policies and training manuals for ethical alignment, track real-time crew-passenger interactions flagged by biometric and passenger input, integrate anonymous traveler reports into quarterly airline ethics scores, visible to the public. "It's not just a watchdog," Lydia explained at a follow-up meeting. "It's a mirror, and some airlines haven't seen their own reflection in years." That quote made its way into the Wall Street Journal the next morning. Meanwhile, backlash began to brew in the shadows. An anonymous leak, almost certainly from an airline lobbyist group, accused Lydia of being a manipulated minor, suggesting Evelyn had pushed her daughter into weaponizing a clause she didn't understand. But Evelyn didn't flinch, and neither did Lydia. In fact, she posted a short clip in response. "I wasn't manipulated. I was ignored. There's a difference." The video went viral within hours. Even members of Congress quietly retweeted it. A few days later, Lydia received a private invitation. Location: Logan International Airport, time 3:00 p.m. Event: closed cabin simulation review with veteran flight crew. She was the only civilian on the list. She arrived early. The simulation chamber was set up like an actual flight cabin, down to the safety cards, pre-boarding announcements, and fake turbulence. But the room wasn't about planes. It was about people. A retired flight attendant named Rosa, with 30 years of service, walked Lydia through scenarios. "I once saw a mother get told her crying baby was a violation of comfort standards by a supervisor," Rosa said. "So, I slipped her a warm towel and gave her a blanket from first class. Got written up for it." Lydia looked at her. "Would this new system have protected you?" "Maybe," Rosa replied. "Or maybe it would have reminded them I was doing the right thing when they forgot what that looked like." That night, Lydia drafted a clause. Any flight crew member who de-escalates a conflict through empathy or service, even against efficiency protocol, will receive ethics credit in their quarterly score, weighted higher than incident avoidance. It was elegant, simple, powerful. The next morning, that clause, the Rosa provision, became part of the PEARL prototype. As the system neared rollout, Lydia was asked to co-present at the International Ethics in Transit Conference, held in Toronto. The ballroom was full of airline execs, transportation ministers, and human rights leaders. When Lydia took the stage, no one whispered this time. She opened with a single image, a split screen of her, seated quietly in coach, and the crew mocking her for her hero moment. She said, "The scariest part of that day wasn't what they said. It was the part of me that almost agreed with them." She paused. "I thought maybe I had been foolish. Maybe giving up your seat is naive. Maybe dignity is too fragile to fly." She looked around the room, but then I realized it wasn't fragility they feared. It was memory, because memory demands change, and systems hate that. Lydia closed with the official unveiling of the Flight Justice Index, and for the first time, showed the real-time ethics dashboard. 3 airlines in red, non-compliant. 4 in yellow, review required. 2 in green. Below each was a live public rating and a direct feedback portal. The room buzzed. Several CEOs looked visibly uncomfortable. One reporter whispered to her editor, "She didn't just start a movement. She built the infrastructure for it." On the flight home, Lydia was upgraded to first class. A younger flight attendant handed her a hot towel, then whispered, "Because of you, we have a voice again. Thank you." Lydia didn't say much, but when she looked out the window, somewhere over Indiana, she saw not just clouds, but the outlines of something new. A sky that wasn't just navigated by altitude and speed, but by ethics, memory, and one girl who refused to stay quiet. The media had moved on, or so they thought. After the rollout of the Flight Justice Index, Lydia had stepped back from interviews. No more press conferences, no more social posts. She had work to do, and attention wasn't fuel anymore. It was friction. But silence doesn't mean stillness. Inside a quiet lab in Bethesda, Maryland, owned by a small ethics tech startup once funded by her late grandmother, Lydia was testing something new: live predictive fairness flagging. A module that could detect ethical bias in policy execution before it escalated. The code was raw, but the idea was sound. Prevent harm before it happens, not after. And it terrified the wrong people. One night, Evelyn walked into Lydia's room with a brown envelope. It had no stamp, no return address, just her name, in sharp black ink. Inside, a USB, encrypted, anonymous, time-stamped only 12 hours ago. Lydia hesitated. Then she ran it through her air-gapped laptop, the one she only used for legacy Bloom documents. It opened a video, grainy, time-stamped cabin footage, from a flight 6 years ago. The frame showed a 9-year-old girl, blonde, petite, curled in her seat, crying silently. A flight attendant towering over her, pointing, shouting. The file was labeled, "Unreported, Flight 7823, Bloom Child Incident." Lydia froze. She looked closer. The girl had a plush penguin clutched to her chest. That wasn't just a child. That was her. For years, Evelyn had told Lydia that flight was uneventful, that they switched flights last minute, that Lydia had just been overtired that day. But now, memory broke the surface, like ice cracking from below. The humiliation, the hands yanking her out of the seat, the screaming. She had repressed it, and someone had buried it. Lydia stared at the screen, and beneath the nausea, something else bubbled up. Resolve. If this had been hidden, what else, huh? Within 48 hours, Lydia and her team traced the incident through FAA archival logs. No formal report was ever filed. No passenger complaint recorded, but the plane's internal system had logged a disturbance code, one that had been redirected through a manual override. Who had that access? Only one entity, Sky North's Internal Ethics Suppression Unit, a now-defunct branch created in 2014 to manage brand-sensitive disruptions. Evelyn paced behind her daughter, fists clenched. "They didn't just hurt you," she muttered. "They deleted you." That week, Lydia filed a Freedom of Information Act request. She didn't expect much, but what she got was a leak. From an internal whistleblower at Sky North, someone who had seen the Flight Justice Index and decided they couldn't stay silent anymore. The file contained a list of 23 minor passengers, mostly girls, flagged for reassignment or removal without consent between 2015 and 2020. 9 of them had hidden incident tags similar to Lydia's. None of the families had been contacted. It wasn't just erasure, it was systemic cleansing of data to protect the airline, not the child. Lydia's next hearing was no longer about accountability. It was about justice. Before the Senate Subcommittee on Transportation Oversight, she stood again. This time, she didn't bring slides. She brought names. "I'm not here to repeat what we already know," she began. "I'm here to name what we've been forced to forget." She read them out loud. 23 names, ages, dates, flights, codes. The room went dead quiet. Every single one of these children was silenced, some too young to even know it. And this is what the system did, not by accident, but by design. Media exploded. Telltales released a follow-up titled, "The Girl They Tried to Erase and Why She's Not Alone." Networks across the country replayed the footage from Flight 7823. Parents called in. Airlines backpedaled. Legal teams scrambled. Sky North denied everything, until one mother, from Portland, came forward. Her daughter, Katie, had been removed from a flight at age 11 for seat confusion. She never understood why. She cried every time she saw a plane. Now, she knew. And she remembered seeing a girl with a penguin toy crying across the aisle. Katie's testimony aired on 60 Minutes. It broke the internet. The dominoes began to fall. Within 72 hours, FAA launched a federal inquiry into Sky North's ethics override protocols. Veritas froze an additional $9.2 million in ethics-linked aviation credit. 3 former executives were subpoenaed. Passenger Protection for Minors Act was reintroduced, now with Lydia's name unofficially attached. On the Senate floor, Senator Dwyer said bluntly, "This time, a child wrote the clause, and the country's going to sign it." The night the bill passed the first vote, Lydia stood on her porch. The sky was quiet. No planes. She whispered to Evelyn, "I used to think they just didn't care about kids like me." Evelyn turned. "They didn't. But now," Lydia said, "they don't get to choose who matters." It began not with thunder, but with silence. At exactly 2:11 p.m. Eastern Time, a quiet ripple hit the system. To most passengers, it felt like a routine delay. A gate change here, a rescheduled boarding call there. But inside the Skyscan Index, something massive had shifted. Lydia Bloom had flagged it. With full emergency privileges granted to her temporarily, as the system's ethical proxy authenticator, Lydia had triggered what few in the industry thought was real. Protocol L7. Internally, it had a code name. Child Echo. Externally, it meant something much louder. A full ethics freeze across 42 federal airports. TSA terminals flickered. Boarding passes pinged red instead of green. Flight crew access codes were denied. Gate agents received simultaneous alerts. Clearance on hold. Skyscan emergency override. Review in progress. By 2:17 p.m., 152 flights were halted. By 2:25, the FAA Central Monitoring Office had received over 700 inbound calls, half from executives demanding answers. the other half from pilots reading this strange new status across their screens. Compliance under ethics review. Do not proceed. Inside her quiet control room, Lydia didn't panic. She monitored the cascade with calm precision. Each alert that came through, she reviewed. Each misbehavior flag, she cross-checked. She wasn't guessing. She was validating what the system had already known, but was never allowed to say. Flight 87112 from Dallas had reassigned a teen girl for balance distribution, but it had no logged policy for the move. Flight 9922 out of LAX downgraded an autistic boy to economy without notifying the parent. Again, no policy, no paper trail. But now, the machine saw everything. Within 30 minutes, the financial dominoes began to fall. SkyNorth's ethics score dropped to level 4, non-compliant on 3 simultaneous flights. The moment that happened, 3 airports, Denver, Raleigh-Durham, and Seattle-Tacoma, automatically suspended active cooperation. Gate leases were frozen, active routes flagged. And then came the cascade. 18.9 M in federal-linked operational insurance credit was suspended. It hit hard, harder than anyone expected. Meanwhile, Lydia received a call from Senator Dwyer. His voice was calm, but firm. "Lydia, you know this is going to make enemies." "I didn't freeze planes," she replied. "The airlines did. I just stopped pretending it was okay." A pause. Then Dwyer said, "We're going to need a name for this. Something memorable." Lydia didn't hesitate. The Bloom Threshold. That night, cable news lit up with headlines. Teen triggers, 18.9 M, freeze in airline ethics shakeup. Is Skyscan the new sheriff of the skies? Passenger ethics over politics. The Lydia Bloom Protocol explained. Some called her dangerous, others, a hero. But Lydia didn't care about labels. She was too focused on the next phase. The FAA called an emergency interagency summit the next morning. Every airline, every airport authority, even representatives from Veritas Capital, the Transportation Secretary's Office, and international observers from ICAO. At the front of the room stood Lydia, small but unmistakably grounded. They expected a speech. Instead, she handed out a printed document, the Bloom Charter. It outlined a mandatory passenger ethics accord tied to Skyscan rating renewal, a clause forcing airlines to publish an annual breakdown of passenger service by age, race, and disability status. A provision stating any airline scoring level 4 or lower would automatically forfeit access to federal route subsidies. The room erupted. Shouts, objections, whispers of litigation. Lydia waited. Then she simply asked, "Would you rather ground 3 flights now or 40 families in silence next year?" That shut them up. Later that afternoon, Chairwoman Ingrid Meyer, head of the National Aviation Compliance Board, spoke quietly to Lydia in the hallway. "You know," she said, "we used to think protecting the skies meant locking the cockpit." Lydia looked up. Maybe now it means opening the cabin. By week's end, SkyNorth's CEO had resigned. 2 major carriers preemptively signed the Bloom Charter to avoid investor panic. 3 international hubs requested integration with Skyscan Index before the next quarter. FAA reclassified minor passenger ethics compliance as a core performance metric, a first in U.S. aviation law. And Lydia? She returned to school, quietly, without an escort, without cameras, just her, a backpack, and a penguin plush that never left her side. One day, sitting on the metro, a flight attendant in plain clothes tapped her shoulder. "I was there, that day. Flight 7823, the woman said. Lydia froze. The woman smiled gently. "I didn't say anything then. I was too new, too scared." Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded napkin. Clean, crisp, untouched. "I kept this. I was going to bring it to you, but I didn't get the chance." Lydia took it, nodded, and this time she didn't cry. The backlash wasn't a wave. It was a silent storm, precise, calculated, relentless. It began with a statement from Sky North's interim CEO, released at 7:02 a.m. The freeze initiated by Skyscan Index has forced us to reevaluate our ethical compliance standards. Effective immediately, we will suspend 14 routes and audit all child and disability passenger incidents from the past 5 years. Translation? Damage control. Nothing more. But to the public, it was too little, too late. By noon, Veritas Capital released its own press memo. We have placed a compliance hold on all pending credit lines for airlines with Level 4 ethics scores. These funds will remain frozen until integration with the Bloom Charter is verified. Total amount impacted, $18.9 million, plus 26.4 members in pending lines. This wasn't about one teen anymore. This was about a system getting caught red-handed, and a girl who refused to stay erased. Lydia Bloom became the reluctant symbol of it all. Every news cycle featured her name. Pundits debated whether she had too much power. Airline execs called for limits on Skyscan's authority. And yet, every parent, every educator, every disabled advocate had one thing to say. Why did it take a 15-year-old to force grown adults to care? At a televised town hall on ethics and transportation policy, Lydia was invited as a guest of honor. She arrived with her hair tied back, no makeup, wearing the same blue cardigan she'd worn the day she gave up her seat. When asked if she regretted activating the protocol, she replied, "No, I regret that I had to." Silence. Then a mother in the back stood up and said her daughter had been kicked off a plane for stimming too loudly. Another woman said her son had been denied a first-class seat because he looked like a hacker. Then a man spoke. His brother, disabled from birth, had been forced to crawl down aircraft stairs when a jet bridge malfunctioned, and nobody helped. Now, it was their time to speak. And Lydia? She just listened. Behind the scenes, something bigger was moving. A coalition of lawmakers, educators, tech developers, and trauma-informed medical experts formed to create the first-ever Passenger Rights and Ethics Standards Act, PRIESA. Its goal? To make Skyscan Index a federal requirement for any airline operating in or out of U.S. airspace. Lydia's mother, Evelyn, was named Senior Policy Advisor to the drafting team. But Lydia didn't want credit. Instead, she met with software teams and accessibility advocates to refine the Skyscan algorithm. She insisted, it doesn't matter if it works for adults. It has to work for kids. Kids don't file complaints. They freeze. They shut down. The system has to see them before they disappear. The room went quiet. Someone said, "That's the most human definition of AI I've heard." Then came the backlash. Real backlash. An anonymous airline executive leaked an internal document titled, "The Bloom Protocol is an Existential Threat." It claimed the protocol would cost them $112 million in annual adjustments, from staff retraining to reworking boarding algorithms to payouts for suppressed ethics incidents. In the memo, they wrote, "If this charter is adopted, it will create an environment where every passenger becomes a liability, and every mistake becomes a weapon." Lydia's response? She posted one sentence, "Or maybe every passenger becomes a human being, and every mistake becomes a chance to change." That post went viral in 43 countries. 3 days later, she was invited to speak before the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO Summit in Geneva. 58 nations, live-streamed to over 17 million viewers. Lydia spoke for only 7 minutes. No teleprompter, no notes. "I'm not here as a coder or a victim or a story. I'm here because I sat in silence too long, and so did too many of us. The skies don't belong to the rich or the loud or the polite. They belong to every person who steps on a plane believing they'll arrive safely and be treated fairly. And if you can't promise that, then maybe you shouldn't fly." A standing ovation. Not polite applause. Real, shaking, tear-filled, gut-deep applause. That night, 4 countries announced immediate Skyscan integration trials. 3 global carriers signed the Bloom Charter. The FAA confirmed that effective the next fiscal quarter, ethics compliance scores would become part of the federal route certification process. And one journalist wrote, For the first time in history, a 15-year-old didn't just speak truth to power. She made power sign a compliance form. Back home, Lydia didn't throw a party. She didn't go on a podcast tour. Instead, she went for a walk with Evelyn. Just the 2 of them. Leaves crunching. October sun low in the sky. At one point, Evelyn asked, "Do you feel proud of yourself?" Lydia paused, then said, "I feel like I can breathe a little deeper. And maybe now, so can some other kid who doesn't even know my name." 6 weeks after the freeze, the entire industry stood at a crossroads. The FAA, pressured by lawmakers and a mounting public reckoning, announced a special hearing, not behind closed doors in Washington, but broadcast live across the country. And at the center of the panel sat 3 names now synonymous with aviation reform. Dr. Evelyn Bloom, representing policy architecture; Mara Kellerman, head of compliance for Veritas Capital; and seated between them, small but unshaken, Lydia Bloom, the 15-year-old who redefined what passenger rights meant. The hearing began with numbers: 152 flights halted, $18.9 million frozen, 42 federal airports affected, 17 airline executives under review, over 28,000 complaints reopened within 48 hours after the freeze. But more than numbers, it was stories that moved the room, testimonies from families, elderly passengers ignored, disabled children mistreated, mothers in tears. And somewhere amid it all, Lydia sat still, her face calm, listening not like a tech architect, but like a survivor. Then came the moment that changed the course of the hearing. FAA Commissioner Brian Renner asked a pointed question. "Ms. Bloom, what gives you, a minor, the right to determine operational status across a federal aviation network?" Lydia didn't flinch. "Sir, I didn't ground planes. The ethics scores did. I didn't write the rules, I just made sure you finally followed them." The audience erupted in applause. Renner leaned back, swallowing his pride. That line, it would end up quoted in Time, The Atlantic, and 3 law school ethics textbooks. Then, at exactly 11:26 a.m., the FAA signed a binding agreement. The Bloom Charter would now be adopted federally, renamed as the Passenger Ethics and Safety Accord. Effective immediately, any airline that dropped below a Level 3 ethics score, failed to address flag discrimination within 72 hours, or refused transparency in passenger treatment data, would be suspended from all federally subsidized routes, including international gateways. The entire U.S. aviation industry had just been rebuilt by a 15-year-old girl with autism and a sense of justice sharper than law itself. The ripples were immediate. Within 3 days, 4 CEOs resigned, 6 airports canceled legacy contracts. Sky North's IPO was pulled from the market, and $880 million in private capital was redirected to carriers who signed early onto the accord. Veritas Capital, Mara's firm, announced that moving forward, no airline would receive investment without passing the Passenger Fairness Index. The index itself, now a national standard, had Lydia's signature encrypted into its back-end source code, not for vanity, but for traceability. "Let them know a child saw them first," she'd said. Journalists asked, "Do you feel vindicated? Do you think airlines fear you now?" Lydia's answer was the same. "They shouldn't fear me. They should fear what happens when kids grow up knowing silence doesn't work." A month later, Lydia was awarded the Presidential Medal of Citizen Impact, the youngest recipient in the award's history. But she skipped the ceremony. Instead, she and Evelyn flew to Geneva, invited by the International Civil Aviation Organization to help draft a global version of the Bloom Charter. They were no longer just fixing America's skies. They were redefining global airspace ethics. Back home, change was visible. First-class cabins posted the Passenger Fairness Code. Flight crew were trained in non-verbal sensitivity protocols. Passengers began rating their flights not on luxury, but on how human they felt. And Lydia? She went back to school, took math, skipped gym, read quietly during lunch. Just another student. Except this one had made airlines rewrite their playbooks. On her 16th birthday, Evelyn asked what she wanted. Lydia smiled and said, "A regular flight, with a regular seat, and no one watching me." They booked a ticket, no upgrades, no staff warnings, just 2 passengers, mother and daughter. And as they boarded, a flight attendant smiled at Lydia, lowered her voice and said, "You made the air safer for my daughter. She has Tourette's." Last year, she wasn't allowed to fly. This year, she's on her 5th round trip. Lydia didn't speak. She just nodded, holding back tears, not for herself, but for the girl on that 5th round trip. That night, Evelyn tucked away a note Lydia had written but never sent. It said, "This isn't about punishing bad people. It's about making silence expensive." And now, silence had a price. And for the first time, justice flew first class. 3 months later, the aviation world was still in recovery. Sky North Airlines, once hailed as a rising giant, was now a cautionary tale studied in MBA ethics courses. Its stock price never recovered. 3 of its board members resigned. And the final blow came when the FAA revoked their federal route privileges, a move triggered by one clause: failure to meet the passenger ethics threshold for 3 consecutive quarters. A clause originally proposed by Lydia Bloom. Meanwhile, the Passenger Ethics and Safety Accord, PESA, had spread globally. Canada, Germany, South Korea, and Australia had already signed on. Airlines in those countries now had to comply with Skyscan protocols. If they didn't, they risked being locked out of international airspace agreements. The shockwaves weren't just financial, they were cultural. Old training manuals were shredded. New onboarding included disability sensitivity and ethics AI audits. And passengers, especially young, disabled, or neurodivergent, started being treated like actual human beings. And then came the ripple no one expected. Booking platforms like SkyMap, GlideFare, and JetWatch announced they would integrate Skyscan ethics scores into their default search filters. That meant passengers wouldn't just choose flights by price or time anymore. They'd choose based on how ethically the airline treats its people. And at the very top of that scoring system, the Bloom Protocol Index. Encrypted, non-editable, and signed by one girl who had once been too scared to speak. Lydia herself. She stayed quiet through most of it. She didn't want awards, didn't want a Netflix documentary, didn't want her name on airport banners. When asked for comment at a Veritas press briefing, she simply said, "Systems don't care until money does. We just made money care." Her voice wasn't angry. It was calm, firm, tired. The voice of someone who had been listened to too late, and now made sure no one else would have to wait as long. By January, the FAA and ICAO jointly announced that all federal certifications for US-based carriers would require full compliance with the SkyEthics Anchor system, the system Lydia had helped design, the one that had been dismissed as overreach and child coding theater when it first launched. Now, it was law. At a Senate Transportation Committee hearing, one member said, "It is deeply embarrassing that a 15-year-old had to show us how broken the skies were." To which Mara Kellerman, now ethics chief for a newly merged airline group, replied, "No, sir. What's embarrassing is she had to code it alone." At the Bloom home, things finally quieted down. The media attention faded. The cameras disappeared. Lydia went back to school. She skipped prom, joined a local robotics club, started working on an open-source project with other neurodivergent coders focused on ethical AI. And every now and then, someone would email her. Not reporters, not CEOs, parents. "My son boarded a plane for the first time without being afraid. My daughter wasn't asked to give up her seat because she flapped her hands. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Lydia never replied, but she kept every message. Then came the final moment. FAA Commissioner Brian Renner, once skeptical, now humbled, invited Lydia to co-author a new pre-boarding federal compliance checklist. She was given a seat at the International Passenger Rights Task Force, usually reserved for career attorneys and senior regulators. Her clause, quietly inserted into the final document, read, "All cabin crew shall be subject to random ethics compliance audits, with at least one assessment per quarter weighted toward responses to passengers under 18 or with documented communication barriers." No headline covered that line, but it would end up saving thousands of kids from silent trauma every year. One evening, Lydia and Evelyn stood at the airport together. They weren't traveling. They just came to sit and watch. Lydia glanced up at a gate where a young boy was boarding with his mother. The boy was stimming gently with a fidget ring. A flight attendant knelt down, not to stop him, but to smile and show her own fidget ring. The mother looked shocked, then relieved. Then she cried. Lydia said nothing. She just watched, then turned to her mom and whispered, "It's working." In the months that followed, Lydia's name faded from the headlines, and that was exactly how she wanted it. Because this wasn't about becoming a hero, or getting famous, or revenge. It was about restoring dignity in places where people were too scared, too tired, or too invisible to ask for it. And it started, not with a viral moment, but with a single, quiet choice. A girl giving up her first-class seat for a pregnant woman. That act, seen as weakness, turned out to be the spark that exposed the system's rot and forced the skies to change. Now, at 16, Lydia Bloom isn't a CEO. She isn't a politician. She isn't a star. She's a girl who still reads quietly in corners, still doesn't like small talk, still freezes when strangers touch her shoulder. But she's also the author of the Bloom Charter, the founder of the Sky Ethics Index, and the reason why $18.9 million froze in silence, so other voices could finally be heard. And that's how justice flew, quietly, seat by seat, until everyone could finally breathe at 30,000 feet. Have you ever been on a flight where someone's silence said more than any words? Tell us where you're watching from, and if you think one act of kindness can still change a system.